Hi there again. I'm Sarah Burns, and I'm continuing on with my talk about the three Reiki symbols that are really powerful working all together. And I want to explain the second symbol today, which most people tend to refer to it as the emotional symbol. Um, I I don't know if you know this or not, but I do know in Buddhism in particular, I've been to many of their teachings, and many of the monks believe that 98% of all physical illness in the world is caused by the emotions. And I think that's why I have put so much emphasis in my own healing practice, working with the emotional states, than me focus particularly on working with the cancer or some other kind of health issue. However, in my practice, I do work with nutrition as well. And I'm not going to talk about that today, but I do think they do go hand in hand. The energies of food as well as the energies that we put into our own state of being. And so today I want to talk about Sei-He-Ki, which in the Buddhist tradition, that same symbol is referred to as Shri, or some people pronounce it Hariya, but many people call it Shri. And what that symbol indicates is that I have to step back for a moment and explain that in Buddhism, in particular, and all the traditions of these, but in Buddhism, there is a belief that there's big importance on balancing out the 5 elements of your being so that you are at peace and in harmony in the world. And that particular symbol belongs to a Buddhist family called, that is headed by Amitabha. Sometimes in Tibet and in Japan, there is a counterpart to Amitabha called Amitiyas, and I will talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But I think it's important to get a little bit of an understanding of Buddhism. Some people think there's only one Buddha in the world, but in Buddhism there are millions of Buddhas in the world, and there's the belief that we can all achieve Buddha statehood by reaching enlightenment. And so, in particular, though, there's also considered 5 Buddha families. And each of those families is related to one of the elements. In the case of Amitabha, or who is, their symbol is Shri, it is related to the element of fire. And if you think about just fire in particular, it's very transmuting of really lower energies. It burns off negativity. But one other part of this, which I did not explain when I was talking about Shokare, Shokare, the power symbol, is actually referred to as primordial water, pure water. And so with the fire element in that, what is happening? So what's happening is, mixing fire and water together, is that you are producing steam or ethers, the gases of the world. But fire and water is needed to move energy. Okay, it creates that current that percolates into air and ether and so on. So, so looking at this from the 5 element perspective is very necessary, really, in Reiki, if you really understand the symbols. It shouldn't be taught that it's some side specialty in Reiki. It really should be the essence of Reiki. So, a little bit about Amitabha, and I decided I'm just going to read what I teach in my program because I don't want to miss anything, but I'm going to stop along the way, and you'll have to forgive me because there is a blind in front of me that's kind of shining in a lot of light right now. And so if you see my glasses reflect, I apologize, but I'm at that age where I really need to have glasses on when I read. But I'm going to stop along the way and kind of interject some things, but I do want to make sure that I get all of these points across so that you're not missing anything about Amitabha. I do once again just want to reiterate there are 5 Buddha families. Amitabha is related to the fire element. I encourage you to go online and to read about the 5 Buddha families. And by the way, one other thing about the Buddha families is, well, let me just start reading. I'm sure I'll interject it along the way. I don't want to sidetrack. I get frustrated watching videos where somebody's just talking and they can't get to their point. So let me not try to do that. Okay, so Amitabha is referred to as the Buddha of infinite light. He's considered the 4th of the 5 Buddha families. And each of these Buddha families carries a primordial wisdom. So there's this belief that each of these wisdoms attached to it is a negative emotional state. And the belief is that those negative emotional states are truly where we begin our work in evolving and reaching enlightenment. And I think that's a real promising way of looking at things because I know being trained in as a social worker, when people get psych diagnosis, they get it for life. There's this belief in psychology that you can never really overcome many of these things. You can manage them, but you never really overcome them. And that's not the same idea or concept that you would find in Buddhism. They believe that that negative emotion is where a person begins their spiritual journey to work through things. And so at the end of that negative emotional state is the primordial wisdom. Okay. And so that the wisdom in this is that ultimately you lose your desire to obtain things. The Buddhists also believe that there are 3 causes of suffering, and those are anger or attachment, desires, and ignorance. And I asked a monk this one time which one was the worst, and he had to think about it for a minute, and he said ignorance. And it did make a lot of sense to me because there's this real misunderstanding. We do this to ourselves all the time where we think, oh, if I only get this or if I only get that, I'm going to be completely happy. And I'm sure you've had that where you've gotten things that you've wanted, but that shininess or that newness wears off. And you may even find once you obtain it that there's some obligation to maintain it. I remember doing Sunday brunch on the water and watching all these men cleaning up their boats. You know, it just didn't look like a fun time to me, but you know, a lot of people like their boats. But thinking about that there's a positive to obtaining these things, but there's also a burden in carrying those things. So it also, again, brings me to this piece that I find kind of ironic in Reiki, is that here you get this symbol that the ultimate wisdom is to lose your desire for things, where many people in Reiki are really promoting get more symbols. You got to be a Reiki master. They can't just be happy with working with what is already right in front of them. It's like, okay, you get these symbols, and then the next thing you know, you want more and more and more, and then it doesn't mean anything. And then a lot of people don't even want to really learn how to do energy healing. They just want it, those symbols, and they want it that title, which really means nothing in the real world. Okay, moving on. So he presides over the Buddha realm called Sukhavati. In Tibetan, that's called Diwa Shin. It's a pure land which is the expression of his own field, a pure expression and nothing else. Amitabha is the lord of the Padma or lotus family, and he's the pure expression of the wisdom of discriminating awareness, which transmutes the poison of attachment and desire. So that's very powerful. It's saying that the less you feel attached to things, the clearer you are going to see, and even most likely will develop opening your third eye more easily when you are letting go of holding on to things so much and worrying about those things. You can just kind of detach and observe and clearly see the world for what it is. He and the other Lotus family members support the gradual unfolding of one's spiritual patterns into enlightenment. This is very important, very, very important, because what that's referring to, those spiritual petals, are the petals on the chakras. And when you're working with the chakra system, the belief is that those petals need to open before the chakra can fully develop. And in this case, working with this, it's a gradual unfoldment. I have to say, in teaching my fundamental Reiki course, where I do Reiki 1 and 2, I do Reiki 1 in the first class, and the final class is Reiki 2. And about week 5 or 6, it's not surprising for me to see a lot of emotional upheaval with my students. And oftentimes they don't even know why they're feeling angry or emotional. And through my own observation, I truly feel that what is happening is from that empowerment from 6 weeks prior, 5 or 6 weeks prior, is that energy is moving away from the Kundalini, or the base of the root chakra where we hold this dormant spiritual energy, and it's moving its way up. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, they only believe there are 5 chakras, whereas in the Hindu, we have the 7. But the bottom line is it's tapping into those petals that are bringing out our emotions. And so there's movement going on. And I will say this, if you don't work with the spiritual practice after getting a Reiki attunement, your life can become chaos. And honestly, that's what happened to me. I didn't even know I got Reiki 1 for 2 years. And I reached out to the same person who gave it to me, but I had no idea she had given me Reiki 1. She gave me no explanation as to what an attunement. What I heard is that she wanted to help me with my healing, and she was going to do this for free. She didn't even show me hand techniques. And I really believe it created a lot of chaos in my life. I wasn't doing spiritual practices, and this is one reason why I have taught this way, is to keep people on track that there is a spiritual process going on, and this is being in a program where you are meeting weekly kind of keeps you in check with this attunement process. And I could tell by my own students, the ones that were staying on track, they had these issues, but they moved through them a lot quicker, whereas people that were just showing up to get the attunements, their lives were becoming chaos, and they were sharing this in each class. So it's observable. Anyway, this is why this is so important, that even though you get that attunement, you've activated or initiated that spiritual journey even more so in your life. And it's gradual, it's subtle. So many people don't make that connection of when that upheaval happens, that it was related to you getting your attunements. I like to call them empowerments because it's a power that you need to cultivate and develop. It's not just this little kind of deal where you're aligned for a moment. It's an empowerment. Okay? So moving on, Amitabha is red, sits in full lotus posture with his hands resting in his lap in the mudra of meditative equipoise. He's most often depicted in tankas flanked by two eminent bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings that are enlightened, that have chosen to return to earth to raise the vibration spiritually in the world. And his two eminent bodhisattvas are Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, and Vajrapani, the bodhisattva of power. Now, Avalokitesvara, we all know, is the Dalai Lama. And so looking at his, how he presents himself are the qualities that you're going to find in working with this symbol as well. It's the ultimate power of Amitabha to give you this sense of joy and compassion for suffering, as well as deep wisdom in our living state of being. So it's the vow of Amitabha that to benefit beings who are caught in the realm of their own confusion and suffering, that if they remember his name with faith at the time of their death, they will take rebirth in Sukhothati. And that's another form of heaven. It's another area of heaven. So through this, they will achieve enlightenment and never fall into the realm of suffering again, which is coming back to earth. This is due to the power of the merit of Buddha Amitabha's virtuous activities accumulated throughout his countless lives as a bodhisattva. Because of this, meditation upon Amitabha is widespread and very popular. Now that's interesting, because when I first started off in Reiki, and even today here or there I'll hear it, that, oh, this was some kind of secret symbol that only the high lamas of Tibet had. No, this is a very common symbol found in Buddhism, very common. And so he's very popular, and people do work with this symbol. And I will tell you at the end how you can work with it. He is the particular lotus of the faith of the Pure Land schools of Buddhism and of the meditative training of Pawas, or transference of consciousness that enables one to transfer their consciousness into the field of pure perception of Sukhothati, the realm of great bliss at the time of death. I have never personally done any POA practices, but it is, there are teachings and trainings in POAs in Buddhism, so that you become clearer of awareness and consciousness, so that you can transmute all your negativity. And usually I'm going to say this, just like when you get the Reiki attunement, some challenge is going to come up for you to learn from, that's going to give you wisdom. And that's the beauty, quote unquote, beauty of being on a spiritual path, is that something is going to challenge you over and over until you get it. Okay? So, moving on, I do want to talk about Amityas, which I mentioned earlier, is kind of a counterform to Abhitaba. At one point, they were both the same being, but in these two traditions, Amityas became still part of the family of Amitabha, but became its own being. And Amityas is considered the Buddha of limitless light, which is what we work with in Reiki. And um, Makayo Yusui is Japanese. So obviously, this was very personal and important to him to work with the Shri symbol as well. And that's why he incorporated it into the Reiki practice. So Amitabha is the reflective form of Amitabha and is the embodiment of infinite light, and therefore the focus of the life practice that removes the possibility of untimely or premature death. He brings about a healing of sickness, degeneration, and imbalances in the 5 elements of the body due to karma, excess, and unclean living. So here we again are discussing the importance of balancing the 5 elements. He's known as the Buddha of long light. He can be seen as red, but sometimes white in color. His 2 hands rest in the lap of the mudra of equanimity with the palms facing each other, holding the base of life that's filled with the nectar of immortality. And so this is really very important, thinking about the fact that he balances out the 5 elements of the body, and due to karma, excess, and unclean living. And this is why I get really kind of frustrated. So I am Buddhist, and I guess my drug is coffee, okay? But you know, there are people that are doing Reiki in the world that are very influenced by smoking pot, or doing mushrooms, or other medications, even Western medicines, you know. And those things have an influence on the state of our being. And I'm not saying get off your meds if you're going to do Reiki, but again, I want to point out that in the Buddhist tradition, the belief is that 98% of all illnesses stem from our emotions. And so that's why it's so important. And I think that's why Makayo Yusui incorporated Shri into the Reiki symbols, is because he himself saw that there was we need to get to unraveling the emotions, because the emotions are considered negative, whereas on the other end of that is our virtues. And so as we look and honor the fact, not bury it, and that's another story about the Reiki precepts, because it kind of gives this concept of believing that you should spiritually bypass your negative states of being, when what you really need to do is go, this is where I am, what's triggering it for me, why do I keep doing these behaviors the same way? Making a vow to yourself to do it differently, forgiving yourself if it happens again, but try again. This is how you progress. You don't do it by saying you're not going to be angry today, or you're not going to be this way. That's part of the commitment of trying. But a lot of people interpret that as to ignore it or pretend that you're not angry. And I've seen a lot of pretty angry Reiki people, I have to say, that, you know, they have the smile on the face, but their claws are out. And we all pick up on that energy. So you can't deny the energy of this, of what's going on with you. What you can do with it, though, is go, okay, let me work on it. Now, I said I want to give you a practice to do if you're open to it. You don't have to do this, but the other thing is I've read in books that, oh, this is from the Heart Sutra. Well, it goes even simpler. A simple way to really tap into Amitabha energy. Um, with that Shri symbol that you've been given, or if you haven't been given it, given the symbols in Reiki, you can still work with this because most Buddhists weren't attuned to Reiki and they work with it. But the way you can work with this symbol is actually seeing it sitting in the very center of your heart chakra. Not your heart on your left side, but your heart chakra. Just simply visualize this symbol as red if you want, and just see rays of light going in 10 directions throughout the world, throughout everybody, from this little tiny symbol in your heart. And then the mantra to work with that they use in Tibetan Buddhism is Om Ami Diwa Shri. Om Ami Diwa Shri. You can see that circling around in, the symbol in your heart, and just see those powerful rays of light go out to the universe to heal others. Now, one thing I didn't mention, and I don't want you to get too wild about this piece of it, but part of in each of these Buddha families also, when you're balancing the elements, is they have a magical quality to them. And the magical quality of Amitabha is the power to attract. Okay, so that's their power. I won't go into all the different elements and their powers, but I will say that the more you work with Amitabha, the more powerful your ability to attract is going to be, which is kind of interesting since the whole thing with getting to this is that you're not wanting to accumulate or have strong desires, but yet you still have that's the power of working with the fire element. I hope this was helpful. It went a lot longer than I had intended it to go, but I'm hoping that you can see in just working with these these symbols, that you don't need a lot. They have a lot of magic to them already. It's just that you need to tap into it and build your bond with the symbol, and understanding at the other end of that symbol is calling in great spirits from the upper world. So I'm Sarah Burns, and I really hope that you got a lot from this talk today. And I'd love to hear your feedback, whether or not you did. And if there's anything else I can share with you that I do teach students or have taught. I'm not actively teaching my fundamental classes anymore, but what I am doing is anybody who has been attuned or wants attuned, to kind of structure what you feel like you need, or we can talk about tailoring something about things that you would like to learn about energy healing. But I've really taken a break from that because I did it from 2006 until a little bit after COVID, and started, and I just feel like I want to, I really got frustrated, I guess, and I've mentioned this and I don't want to go into it, but a lot of people ended up coming into my program and misusing the information I gave them. They broke their commitments to me about how they were going to work with it. And some of them started advertising that they were professional Reiki people, even after they just got Reiki 1 without any further training from me. So I was disheartened by some of the people that showed up. And so I am open to teaching those that truly desire to learn, okay, and structuring something that is going to work for you, what you need. So I'm Sarah Burns, and again, I hope this helped put you more on the path of honoring the 5 elements in Reiki. You take care and have a wonderful day.